The marble floor was cold against Grant Whitfield's cheek. His chest burned. His arms felt heavy as iron. Above him, the chandelier swung in his blurred vision like a slow pendulum, throwing small sparks of light across the ceiling. He could hear footsteps. He could hear voices. He could hear the soft, steady breathing of someone kneeling beside him. Sir, can you hear me? Stay with me, please stay with me." The voice was warm, steady. The hands that pressed against his neck searching for a pulse were sure and gentle. He felt fingers slide under his head, lifting it carefully off the cold stone, supporting him as if he were something precious. A few feet away, his fiancée stood with her phone glowing in her palm. Celeste Harrington's blonde hair was pulled into a low knot. Her cream silk dress did not have a single wrinkle. She was typing. Her thumb moved across the screen with calm precision, while her future husband lay sprawled on the floor of the dining room. "Should I not call the doctor first, ma'am?" the kneeling woman asked softly. Her voice held no panic, only urgency, only care. Celeste glanced down without looking at Grant. "Yes, of course. Call Dr. Bellamy. I'm just letting Theodore know." The kneeling woman, a young black woman in a pale blue uniform, did not respond to that strange answer. She simply pressed her fingers more firmly to Grant's wrist and counted his pulse. Her free hand pulled a small radio from her apron pocket and called the medical team. Her name tag, tilted slightly, read NINA. Grant kept his eyes half closed. He kept his breathing slow. He kept his face slack. His heart was racing inside his chest, but not from any illness. He had practiced this for 2 weeks with Dr. Bellamy. He had rehearsed the slow blink, the heavy fall, the final sound he would make before going still. He had planned all of it the morning he overheard Celeste on the phone in the rose garden. 3 days, maybe 4, then I'll have full access. Theodore's drawing up the papers now. That sentence had played in Grant's head like a song he could not turn off. He had not slept that night. He had not eaten the next morning. He had walked through his own home like a ghost, watching the woman he had planned to marry move through rooms full of his furniture, his paintings, his life. And he had begun to understand that everything he had built was about to be quietly stolen by the 2 people who said they loved him most. So he had gone to Dr. Bellamy. He had told her everything, and together they had built the plan. A medical team rushed into the dining room. Grant felt himself being lifted onto a stretcher. He felt the soft pressure of straps around his chest. He felt Nina release his hand, then heard her step back to give the team room. He heard Celeste's voice rise into a careful, practiced sob. Oh my God, Grant, please, please come back to me." Even with his eyes closed, Grant could tell she was performing. Her voice had the same fake tremor she used at charity galas when she pretended to care about children she had never met. The stretcher began to roll. Nina's voice came from somewhere behind him, soft and worried. "I'll come help in the medical wing if you need an extra pair of hands." "Yes, dear, that would be a great help," Dr. Bellamy answered firmly. And just like that, the woman who would change his life forever followed him out of the dining room. If you've ever watched someone you trusted plan to hurt you while smiling at your face, you already know what Grant felt that night. Have you ever stayed silent while someone you loved revealed who they really were? Tell us in the comments. And if this story has touched you so far, please subscribe so you do not miss what happens next, because what comes after this is going to break your heart and put it back together. 3 weeks earlier, Nina Carter had walked into the staff entrance of the Whitfield estate carrying a thermos of hot tea and a small photograph of her son tucked into her apron pocket. She was 27 years old. She had been a widow for 3 years. She had a 5-year-old boy named Eli who slept in her aunt's spare room every night, while Nina worked the late shift cleaning the most expensive house in the state of Connecticut. The estate was a sprawling stone home with 16 bedrooms, a private medical wing, 2 kitchens, a library larger than her childhood church, and a rose garden that her late husband would have loved. Nina did not mind the long hours. She did not mind the cold marble floors. She did not mind the way some of the wealthy guests looked through her like she was a piece of furniture. She had a job. She had a paycheck. She had her boy. And her boy was everything. The head housekeeper, Margaret Foley, met Nina at the side door with a clipboard and a warm smile. Margaret was a short, round woman in her late 50s with a gray bob and eyes the color of warm honey. She had taken to Nina from the first day, partly because Nina worked harder than anyone on the staff, and partly because Margaret had buried her own husband young and recognized the quiet weight a widow carried. "You're early again, sweetheart," Margaret said, handing her the night list. "My aunt was already there to pick up Eli, so I caught the earlier bus." Margaret's eyes softened. "How is the little man?" "Reading, always reading. He read me a whole page from a science book this morning." 5 years old. 5 years old. Margaret shook her head with a small, proud smile. "Mr. Whitfield is having a private dinner tonight. Just him and Miss Harrington. You'll be on the upper floor refreshing the bedrooms and the medical wing. If they need anything from the dining hall, the kitchen staff will handle it. You stay clear of the dining room unless you're called." "Yes, ma'am." Nina did not see Grant Whitfield that night, not until he was on the floor. Earlier that same afternoon, Grant had stood in his upstairs office staring out at the rose garden. Dr. Patricia Bellamy stood beside him with her hands folded in front of her white coat. She was a tall African-American woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "You're certain about this," she said. "It was not a question." "I'm certain. 3 weeks minimum, possibly 4. You'll need full medical staging. Vitals will need to be managed. The fluids will need to be real. The feeding tube will be partially functional, but I'll teach you to swallow correctly when no one is watching." "I understand." "Grant," she turned to face him directly, "if you are wrong about her, if she is innocent, this will destroy your relationship." He was quiet for a long moment. "I heard her on the phone, Patricia. She said she was going to take everything, and Theodore was helping her, my own brother." "Stepbrother?" "He's the only family I've got left, and he's drawing up papers behind my back." Dr. Bellamy nodded slowly. "Then we do it right. Harold knows." "Harold knows." "Good, because we're going to need someone to gather evidence while you're laying there pretending to be unconscious. And nobody watches a household like Harold Pierce." Grant turned from the window and looked at the only doctor he had ever fully trusted. "Patricia," he said quietly, "if I die during this, promise me you'll make sure Theodore never gets a single dollar." Dr. Bellamy's jaw tightened. "You're not going to die. You're going to learn the truth, and then you're going to live the rest of your life smarter than you lived the first half." He almost smiled. That night at dinner, Celeste had worn the cream silk dress. She had laughed at things he did not say. She had told him about a charity event she wanted him to host next month. She had reached across the table and touched his wrist while telling him she could not wait to be his wife. Grant had taken 3 slow sips of wine. He had taken 1 slow breath. And then, exactly as Dr. Bellamy had taught him, he had let his hand drop, his fork clatter, his body slide sideways off the chair. The last thing he saw before he closed his eyes was Celeste reaching, not for him, but for her phone. The first thing he felt after that was a stranger's gentle hand on his neck. A stranger named Nina. The medical wing of the Whitfield estate was nothing like a hospital. It was a quiet, soft-lit room on the second floor with pale blue walls, a tall window overlooking the gardens, and a single hospital bed surrounded by carefully hidden monitors. Dr. Bellamy ran it like a private practice. 2 nurses worked rotating shifts. Everything was clean. Everything was discreet. By the time the medical team rolled Grant Whitfield through the double doors, Nina Carter was already there with fresh towels, sterile gloves, and a calm face. She had run upstairs ahead of them. She had stripped the bed and remade it with crisp cotton sheets. She had filled a pitcher with cold water. She knew the routine because Margaret had trained every staff member to be ready for any emergency in a house this large. "Set him gently," Dr. Bellamy ordered. "Nina, can you help lift his shoulders?" "Yes, ma'am." Nina slid her arms under Grant's shoulders and helped guide him from the stretcher to the bed. He felt warm. His skin was pale but not cold. His breathing was shallow and even. His eyes were closed and his face was relaxed. She had helped lift sick people before. Her own husband had been bedridden for the last 6 months of his life. She knew the difference between the heaviness of unconsciousness and the heaviness of grief in someone's bones. This man felt like the first. She had no reason to suspect anything else. Dr. Bellamy moved with practiced efficiency, attaching monitors, checking pupil response, ordering Nina to fetch saline and a soft pillow for under his neck. "Where is Miss Harrington?" Nina asked quietly while she adjusted the pillow. "On her phone in the hallway, I imagine. I'll speak with her when I finish stabilizing him." Nina did not respond. She had been raised by an aunt who taught her never to speak ill of people who had not yet proven themselves to be worth her words. But she had seen what she had seen. A man on the floor, a woman texting. She kept her hands moving. 20 minutes later, Celeste finally walked into the medical wing. Behind her was a man Nina had only seen a few times before, Theodore Whitfield, Grant's stepbrother. He worked at the company. He visited the estate maybe once a month. He had a long, narrow face and hazel eyes that never quite landed on the person he was speaking to. "Doctor," Celeste said, her voice soft and trembling, "how is he?" "Stable for now. We don't know what triggered the collapse. It could be cardiac, it could be a stroke. We're running tests through the night." "Will he wake up?" Dr. Bellamy paused. She had rehearsed this answer 3 times in front of the mirror that morning. "It's too early to say. He may regain consciousness within hours. He may remain in this state for days, possibly weeks. The brain is unpredictable when something like this happens. We'll know more by tomorrow." Celeste pressed a manicured hand to her mouth. Theodore put a steady arm around her shoulders. The gesture was a fraction too long, a fraction too comfortable. Nina, folding a towel near the wall, caught the way Celeste leaned into him, then quickly straightened. She filed it away in her head. She did not understand what she had seen, but she remembered it. "I want a second opinion," Celeste said. "I want a specialist, the best in the country." "I am the best in the country, Miss Harrington. I have run his medical care for 9 years." Of course, doctor. I just meant I want to be sure." "You may bring in any specialist you wish. With Mr. Whitfield's power of attorney resting with his stepbrother in cases of incapacity, that decision is now Mr. Theodore Whitfield's to make." Theodore's eyes lit up for a half-second before he caught himself. "We'll discuss it," he said carefully, "tonight." Celeste squeezed his arm. Then she walked to the bed, leaned over Grant and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. "I love you, my darling. Come back to me soon." Grant did not move, but Nina, watching from across the room, saw something flicker at the corner of his closed eye, a tightening, a pulse of muscle, so small that anyone else would have missed it. She did not. That night, after Celeste and Theodore left the medical wing, Dr. Bellamy assigned Nina to stay with Grant until 2 in the morning. The night nurse would arrive at midnight, but Dr. Bellamy wanted a steady pair of eyes on him before then. "You don't need to do anything fancy, dear," Dr. Bellamy said. "Just sit with him, make sure his breathing stays steady, wipe his forehead if he sweats, talk to him if you feel like it. Some patients in these states can hear what's said around them. It can comfort them." "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Bellamy paused at the door. She looked back at the young woman sitting in the chair beside Grant's bed. Nina had pulled out a small, worn paperback from her apron pocket, a children's chapter book about a brave young girl and her dog. She was opening it carefully, smoothing the pages. "Nina," Dr. Bellamy said. "Ma'am." "Thank you for being so calm tonight. Not everyone would have been." Nina smiled gently. I've sat with sick people before, ma'am. My husband. He was sick for a long time before he passed. I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you. Dr. Bellamy left the room. Nina opened the book. She glanced at Grant. He looked peaceful. She began to read aloud, softly, the way she used to read to her husband in his last weeks, the way she still read to her son every night when he could not sleep. Chapter 1. The morning the world changed for Sadie Brown was the morning her dog Biscuit ran away. Grant lay still. His chest rose and fell. His face stayed calm. But somewhere behind his closed eyes, a small, unfamiliar feeling was beginning to take shape. He had expected the fake coma to feel like a chess game, a long, cold, calculated waiting room. He had not expected the soft sound of a woman's voice, reading a children's book to him in the middle of the night. He had not expected to feel less alone than he had in years. Plot threads opened in Chapter 1 and 2. Grant's fake coma plan, Nina's role as single mother caregiver, Celeste and Theodore's affair hint, Dr. Bellamy as ally, Harold to gather evidence. Plot threads to resolve later. All of the above plus forthcoming forgery, eviction plan, and exposure. By the third night, Nina had learned the rhythm of the medical wing. She arrived at 6 in the evening, relieved the day nurse, and worked until 2 in the morning before going home to sleep until 10. Her Aunt Rosalind kept Eli during her shifts and sent her photos of him every few hours so she could see his face during her short breaks. The Whitfield estate had grown quieter during Grant's coma. Most of the staff moved through the halls with hushed voices. Margaret Foley had set strict rules about noise on the second floor. Dr. Bellamy was now living in a guest suite next to the medical wing, so she could monitor Grant around the clock. Harold Pierce, the head of estate security, had increased the patrols and added new cameras in several rooms that he claimed were for the safety of the unconscious owner. Celeste and Theodore did not seem to notice the new cameras. That was exactly what Harold was counting on. Harold was a tall, gray-haired man in his 60s with the straight posture of someone who had spent his early years in the Marines. He had worked for the Whitfield family for 22 years. He had watched Grant grow from a serious young man into a serious, wealthy man. He had also watched Theodore grow from a sulking teenager into a sulking adult who never quite forgave Grant for being chosen as the heir. When Grant had pulled Harold aside 3 weeks before the staged collapse and explained the plan, Harold had not blinked. "Where do you want the cameras?" he had simply asked. "The east drawing room, the library, the hallway outside the master's suite, the rose garden, and anywhere else you think she'll talk freely." "Done." Now on the third night, Harold sat in his small office off the security wing, watching 3 monitors at once. On the left screen, Theodore was packing in the library with a phone pressed to his ear. On the middle screen, Celeste was lounging on a chaise in the east drawing room, sipping wine, scrolling through her phone. On the right screen, Nina was sitting beside Grant's bed, reading aloud from a children's book. Harold turned up the volume on the middle screen. "No, I don't think we should rush it," Celeste was saying into her phone. "Theodore says the doctor is being difficult. We need to wait until she's cleared us through the worst of it. If he doesn't wake up in 2 weeks, then we move. Patience, sweetheart, patience pays better." Harold pressed record. He had already collected 9 hours of similar conversations. He glanced at the right screen where Nina was reading. Her voice was too soft to pick up clearly without raising the volume too high, but he could see her face. She was reading carefully, slowly, pointing at the pictures sometimes, whispering each character's name with a different small smile. Harold sat back in his chair and shook his head. "That young woman has no idea what she's caught up in," he muttered to himself. Then he turned back to the middle screen and listened to Celeste plan how to spend Grant's money. Nina did not know about the cameras. She did not know about the recordings. She did not know about the conspiracy that was tightening like a slow knot around the man whose hand she sometimes held while she read. She only knew that something inside her had begun to soften toward Grant Whitfield in a way she could not fully explain. She had not known him before the coma. She had only seen him from a distance during her first weeks at the estate. He had always seemed serious, quiet, the kind of man who walked through his own house like he was looking for a quiet place to think. She had never imagined a man like that lying still under a blue blanket while a young black woman read him stories meant for children. But there he was. And there she was. On the third night, she did not bring the children's book. She brought a small pocket Bible that her grandmother had given her when she turned 16. She did not know if Grant Whitfield was a religious man. She did not know much about him at all, but she felt that some words were good to say in a quiet room, no matter who was listening. She read him the 23rd Psalm. Then she sat quietly beside the bed and folded her hands in her lap. "Mr. Whitfield," she said softly, "I don't know if you can hear me. The doctor says some folks can. I'm Nina. I work in your house. I clean the upstairs and sometimes the library. I have a son. His name is Eli. He's 5. He's the smartest little person I've ever known. His daddy passed 3 years ago. Cancer. So it's just the two of us and my Aunt Roz." She paused. She did not know why she was telling him this. "You seem like a nice man, Mr. Whitfield. Your housekeeper Margaret says you've always been kind to the staff. You pay above standard. You give holiday bonuses. You remember names. That's rare." Grant lay still, breathing softly. Behind his closed eyes, his throat felt tight. "I just wanted you to know somebody is praying for you to wake up. My grandma used to say a kind word in a quiet room is like a small candle in a big house. It doesn't seem like much, but it makes the whole place a little brighter. So that's what I'm doing, lighting a candle." She paused. "Good night, Mr. Whitfield." She stood, smoothed her apron, and walked quietly out of the room. Grant lay in the dark for a long time afterward, his eyes still closed, his face still slack, his heart aching in a way he had never felt before. The next morning, Dr. Bellamy met Harold in the small kitchen at the back of the medical wing. They both held cups of coffee. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "How much have you got?" Bellamy finally asked. 11 hours of recordings. 3 of them are damning. Theodore had a lawyer at the house yesterday morning while Celeste kept Grant's mother distracted on the phone. They were drafting transfer of power documents. The lawyer is a man named Bram Holcroft. I've already sent the file to Vivian Holloway. Vivian's the right person. She always is. Bellamy took a long sip of coffee. Has Celeste tried to influence Grant's care yet? She suggested moving him to a private facility 2 states away. Bellamy's eyes narrowed. She wants him out of the house. She wants him out of the house. She'll try harder. Watch her closely. I'm watching everything. Dr. Bellamy nodded slowly. Then she said, almost to herself, "That young woman, Nina, she's been talking to him, reading to him. I noticed. He listens. I can see his vitals shift slightly when she's in the room. Heart rate evens out. Blood pressure drops a point." Harold was quiet for a moment. "He's got better company in that room than he ever had in his own dining room," he said. Dr. Bellamy did not disagree. On the 7th day of Grant's coma, Aunt Rosalind called Nina at 6 in the morning. Her voice was tight with apology. "Baby, my back is acting up real bad. I can barely stand. I need to go see Dr. Phillips today, and I don't think I can keep Eli." Nina sat up in bed. The morning light was just beginning to creep through the thin curtains of her 1-bedroom apartment. "Auntie, are you okay?" "I'll be all right. It's my sciatica, but I can't watch him today. Can you keep him with you?" Nina rubbed her face. She did not know what to do. She could not call out of work. The estate had specific rules about staff bringing children, and she had never asked Margaret about exceptions. But Eli was her whole world, and her aunt's health came first. "Let me call Margaret. I'll figure it out." She hung up and dialed the head housekeeper. Margaret listened, then said simply, "Bring him. Mr. Whitfield is in a coma, sweetheart. Miss Harrington is in the city for a fitting today and won't be back until evening. Mr. Theodore is at the office. The East Library is empty. I'll set him up in there with crayons and a snack. I'll watch him myself when you can't." Nina closed her eyes against tears. She did not have time to cry. "Thank you, Margaret." "Don't thank me. Thank the Lord for sending us a fitting situation. Now get your boy and come on." Eli Carter was small for his age. He had warm brown skin like his mother, big curious eyes, and a head of soft curls his Aunt Rosalind kept neatly trimmed. He wore a green jacket that was a size too big for him, blue jeans and red sneakers that lit up when he walked. He held his mother's hand all the way through the staff entrance, his eyes wide as saucers as he took in the sweeping ceilings, the grand chandeliers, the tall windows letting in soft, cool light. "Mama," he whispered, "this is a castle." "It's just a big house, baby." "It's a castle." Margaret met them at the side door with a soft smile and bent down to Eli's height. "Hello there, young man. My name is Miss Margaret. I run this whole house. Your mama tells me you're a serious reader. Is that true?" Eli nodded shyly. "What's your favorite book?" "The one about Sadie and Biscuit." Margaret's eyes flicked to Nina. Nina smiled. "It's the one I've been reading to Mr. Whitfield." "Well, isn't that something?" Margaret straightened up. "Come on, Eli. I've got a quiet little room with a big window where you can color and read while your mama works, and I've got cookies." Eli's eyes went wide. "Real ones." "Real ones." Eli looked up at his mother for permission. Nina nodded. He let go of her hand and slipped his small hand into Margaret's. That afternoon, while Nina worked the medical wing, Eli sat in the East Library with a stack of picture books, a plate of chocolate chip cookies, and a sketchpad with crayons. Margaret checked on him every 20 minutes. He never once complained. He never wandered. He sat at the small table by the window like a tiny scholar. At 3 in the afternoon, Nina came down to give him lunch. They sat on the floor together by the bookshelf. She gave him a sandwich and an apple. He ate quickly and quietly, then crawled into her lap. "Mama, can I see the man?" "What man, baby?" "The sleeping man, the one you read to." Nina hesitated. "He's very sick, Eli. He can't talk." "I won't talk loud. I'll be quiet like a mouse." Nina looked at his small, earnest face. She thought about the rules. She thought about Dr. Bellamy. She thought about Grant lying in that bed, hearing nothing except the voices of people who wanted his money. She thought a child's voice in a quiet room is a small candle. "Okay," she whispered, "but just for a minute, and you have to be very, very quiet." "I promise, Mama." She took his hand and led him up the back staircase to the medical wing. Grant was lying on his side, the way Dr. Bellamy had positioned him an hour ago to prevent bed sores. His breathing was steady. The afternoon light through the tall window fell across his blue blanket in soft pale stripes. Nina lifted Eli into her arms so he could see Grant's face. Eli stared. "Mama, is he gonna die?" "I don't know, baby. I hope not." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out a small hand and laid it gently on Grant's wrist, the way he had seen his mother do. "Mister," Eli whispered, "if you can hear me, please wake up. My mama needs her job, and you got nice cookies in your house, and the lady with the gray hair is real nice. You should come back so you can eat the cookies too." Grant did not move. But somewhere behind his closed eyes, a tear pushed its way out and slid silently down the side of his face into the pillow. Nina did not see it. But Dr. Bellamy, standing in the doorway behind them, did. She backed away quietly without saying a word. That night, after Eli was asleep on a small cot Margaret had set up in the staff break room, Nina sat by Grant's bed and read him another psalm. Then she did something she had not done before. She took his hand. "Mr. Whitfield," she said softly, "my boy met you today. I hope you don't mind. He's a sweet child. He told you to wake up because there are cookies in your house. I think he meant something bigger than that. Children always do." She held his hand a little longer. "He lost his daddy 3 years ago. He doesn't remember him much. So when he sees a man lying still like this, I think he gets scared. I'm sorry if it bothered you. He just wanted to see if you were real." She squeezed his hand gently. "You're real, Mr. Whitfield. You're a real person and you're going to wake up." "I believe that." She let go and went back to folding clean towels. Grant lay still. His chest rose and fell. But inside, something was breaking apart and rebuilding itself at the same time. On the 10th day of the coma, Theodore Whitfield came home from the city with a leather briefcase, a flushed face, and a secret that was beginning to weigh too much for him to carry alone. He walked straight into the east drawing room where Celeste was reading a fashion magazine and waiting for him. "It's done," he said quietly, setting the briefcase on the coffee table. "Bram drafted everything, the transfer of power, the temporary CEO appointment, the medical authorization." Celeste looked up slowly, and the signatures. "The medical authorization just needs Dr. Bellamy. The rest just needs my signature as next of kin and Grant's notarized incapacity declaration." "How are we getting Bellamy to sign?" Theodore shifted on his feet. "I've talked to her twice. She won't budge. She says the prognosis is uncertain and she will not declare him permanently incapacitated until 28 days have passed." 28 days. Celeste set the magazine aside. "We don't have 28 days, Theodore." "I know. So we replace her." Theodore frowned. "She has a contract it would take months to dissolve." "Then we go around her. There are other doctors. We bring in a specialist who is friendly to our position. We get a second opinion, a third. We make Bellamy look like the difficult one. We make her look unreasonable." "That's risky." "Everything about this is risky. The reward is a fortune." Theodore swallowed. In the security office, 2 floors away, Harold Pierce was recording every word. The next morning, Celeste called Dr. Bellamy into the upstairs sitting room. "Doctor, I'd like a second opinion." "You've mentioned that, Miss Harrington. As I said before, you are welcome to bring in any specialist you like, with Mr. Theodore's signature on the consent forms, of course." "I've consulted with a Dr. Sterling Kramer." Celeste handed her a card. "He runs a private clinic in Boston. He's willing to come down this afternoon." Dr. Bellamy glanced at the card. She had never heard of Dr. Sterling Kramer. She would look him up the moment she left the room. "I'll review his credentials." "He has wonderful credentials, and he's already been briefed on the case. He says that prolonged comas of this type often have very poor recovery rates, and that 28 days is excessive when he could provide a faster, more decisive evaluation." "He told you this without having examined the patient." "He told me his preliminary opinion based on the medical summary I sent him." Dr. Bellamy's voice did not change, but her eyes hardened. "You sent his medical records to a doctor without my consent." "He's my fiancé. I have the right to consult any doctor I please." "You have the right to consult. You do not have the right to release records. Those records belong to the patient and to me as his treating physician until power of attorney transfers." Celeste's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing me of something, doctor?" "I am informing you of medical law." A long, cold silence. Finally Celeste smiled, that thin, controlled smile she had perfected at boarding school. "Of course, I apologize. I'll have Theodore handle the paperwork going forward." "That would be wise." Dr. Bellamy left the sitting room. The moment the door closed behind her, she walked straight to the security office. Harold opened the door before she knocked. "You heard," he said. "I heard. Look up Dr. Sterling Kramer right now." Harold turned to his computer. Within 30 minutes, they had a full picture. Dr. Sterling Kramer ran a small private clinic in Boston that had been investigated twice for fraudulent disability declarations. He had a thin license and a long history of being paid by family members of wealthy patients to declare those patients permanently incapacitated. "He's a hired gun," Harold said. "He's a hired gun in a doctor's coat." "What do we do?" Dr. Bellamy thought for a long moment. "We let him come. You'll let him examine Grant. I'll let him try, and I'll record every minute of it. And then I'll have Vivian Holloway file a report with the medical board the moment he steps off this property." Harold nodded slowly. "That's smart. It's how we trap them. They think we're trying to fight them. We're not. We're letting them fight themselves into a corner." That afternoon, Dr. Sterling Kramer arrived at the Whitfield estate. He was a short, balding man in his 50s with a too-bright tie and a too-confident handshake. Theodore met him at the front door. Celeste hovered nearby. Dr. Bellamy stood in the medical wing waiting with a small recording device in her coat pocket and a calm, professional smile on her face. The examination took 23 minutes. Dr. Kramer did not run a single proper test. He did not check Grant's pupil response with the right tools. He did not measure his reflex responses. He glanced at the chart, looked at the patient, asked Dr. Bellamy 2 questions, and then declared with great authority that this was a stage 3 coma with very poor prognosis, and that the patient was almost certainly facing permanent vegetative state. Dr. Bellamy nodded politely. "Thank you for your assessment, Dr. Kramer. I can have the formal report ready by tomorrow morning." "That would be very helpful." He turned to Celeste in the hallway. "I'll need a retainer, of course." "Of course, Theodore will handle it." Theodore handed him an envelope. The envelope contained $20,000 in cash. Harold caught the entire exchange on 3 different cameras. That night, Vivian Holloway received a courier package containing a flash drive. By morning, the medical board had received an anonymous tip. By the end of the week, Dr. Sterling Kramer's license would be under review. But Theodore and Celeste did not know any of that yet. They thought they were winning. Back in the medical wing, Nina was reading to Grant again. She had finished the children's book the night before. Tonight she was reading him an article from a magazine she had found in the staff lounge. It was about a community garden in a small town that had transformed an empty parking lot into a place where children grew vegetables. "Imagine that, Mr. Whitfield. They turned an old parking lot into something that feeds folks. Isn't that beautiful?" She paused, then she chuckled to herself. "My boy would love a garden like that. He keeps asking me when we can plant tomatoes. We live in an apartment, so I can't really, but I bought him a little pot for the windowsill last week. He's growing a single basil plant. He named it Stanley." Grant felt his chest move with something close to a laugh. He wondered if Nina noticed. She kept reading. He thought about a boy who named a basil plant Stanley. He thought about a mother who scraped together enough for a windowsill garden. He thought about a fiancée who had just paid a fraudulent doctor $20,000 to declare him brain dead. And he made a decision that changed the rest of his life. On the 13th day of the coma, Celeste began removing people. The first was the gardener, a quiet older Italian-American man named Antonio Russo who had worked at the estate for 15 years. Celeste claimed he had damaged a rose bush. He had not, but she fired him anyway, citing carelessness. The second was a young kitchen assistant named Charlotte Peterson, a tall white woman in her 20s who had served Grant his coffee every morning since she had been hired. Celeste claimed she had been disrespectful. She had not. The third was the night driver. The fourth was one of the maids in the West Wing. Margaret Foley watched all of this with rising alarm. She knew exactly what was happening. Celeste was clearing out the loyal staff. She was replacing them with people she could control, people who would not testify if anything ever came of an investigation. By the end of the second week, 6 longtime employees had been let go. On the morning of the 15th day, Celeste called Margaret into her sitting room. "Margaret, I'd like to discuss one of your maids, Nina Carter." Margaret felt her stomach tighten. "Yes, Miss Harrington." "She's been spending an unusual amount of time in Mr. Whitfield's medical wing." "At Dr. Bellamy's request, yes." "I see. And she also brought a child onto the property last week." "Yes, ma'am, with my permission. Her aunt who normally watches the boy was ill." "That is a violation of estate policy." "There is no policy against it, ma'am. I checked." Celeste's smile thinned. "There is now." Margaret kept her face calm. "What is it you would like me to do, Miss Harrington?" "I'd like you to terminate her." "On what grounds?" "Theft." Margaret's heart skipped. "Excuse me. There are 2 pieces of jewelry missing from my private dressing room. I believe Nina Carter took them." "Miss Harrington, Nina Carter has never set foot in your dressing room. That space is cleaned only by Hannah Caldwell, your personal attendant. Hannah is loyal. Nina has been wandering. I want her gone today." Margaret took a slow breath. She was a 58-year-old widow with 3 grown children and a small house she had finally paid off last year. She did not need this job. She had savings. She had a pension waiting. But she had also given 26 years of her life to this estate, and she had never once compromised her conscience for a paycheck. She was not about to start. "Miss Harrington, with respect, I cannot terminate Nina Carter on those grounds. There is no evidence. She has not been in your dressing room. If you would like me to investigate the missing jewelry, I will. But I will not fire a woman who has done nothing wrong on the word of someone who cannot place her at the scene." Celeste's eyes turned sharp. "Are you refusing me?" "I'm refusing to fire an innocent woman." "Then perhaps you should also pack your things, Margaret." Margaret nodded slowly. "Perhaps I should." She turned and walked out of the sitting room with the same calm posture she had carried through 26 years of difficult employers. She went straight to Harold Pierce. "She just tried to fire me," Margaret said. "I heard," Harold said. "I'm going to call Vivian." "Call Dr. Bellamy too. Tell them both. Things are moving fast now." In the medical wing, Grant heard Dr. Bellamy walk in with quick steps. "Grant," she whispered, leaning close to his ear so only he could hear, "Margaret Foley just told Celeste no. Celeste is trying to fire her, and she's accused Nina of theft." Grant's hand twitched once. It was the smallest signal, the one they had agreed on if he wanted to communicate without breaking cover. One twitch. "I heard you. Continue." "Vivian is filing emergency injunctions. Harold has all the recordings. We are very close to having enough to act." One twitch. "Hold on, Grant. Hold on a few more days." One twitch. She left the room. Grant lay in the dark. Somewhere inside him, a quiet, cold rage was rising. But under the rage was something else. A protective feeling for a young woman who had read him children's books and prayed for him. For a 5-year-old boy who had wished him well over a plate of cookies. For a head housekeeper who had refused to lie. For a doctor who had risked her career on a single phone call. For a head of security who had built a quiet net around the truth. These people had no idea he was awake. They were standing up for him anyway. They were standing up for what was right. He had spent his whole adult life surrounded by people who whispered yes to his face and plotted no behind his back. He had not known that a different kind of person was working under his own roof the entire time. That afternoon, Margaret found Nina in the medical wing folding clean linens. She closed the door softly behind her. "Sweetheart, I have to tell you something." Nina looked up. "What's wrong, Margaret?" "Miss Harrington wants you fired. She's claiming you took jewelry from her dressing room." Nina's face went still. I have never been in her dressing room. I know. I would never. I have never taken so much as a paperclip from this house. I know that too, and I told her so. Nina sat down slowly on the edge of a small chair. What's going to happen? She told me to fire you today. I told her no. She told me to pack my things. Nina's eyes filled. Margaret, no. It's all right. I have a pension and a paid-off house. I'm 58 and I'm tired. But I want you to know what's coming. She'll go around me. She'll try to fire you herself. I want you to be ready. I want you to know there are people in this house who know the truth. Nina pressed her hands to her face. I can't lose this job, Margaret. I have my boy. I have my aunt. I can't. You're going to be all right, Nina. I promise you. You're going to be more than all right. You just have to keep walking through these next few days with your head up. Margaret reached down and took Nina's hands. You hear me? Head up. The truth is going to come out. And when it does, the right people are going to be standing on the right side of it, including you. Nina nodded, her eyes wet. Margaret squeezed her hands. In the bed 3 feet away, Grant Whitfield made a quiet, silent vow. If it was the last thing he did, he would protect every single person in this room. On the 18th day of the coma, Celeste fired Nina Carter herself. She summoned Nina to the upstairs sitting room at 4 in the afternoon. Theodore was there. So were 2 new security guards Celeste had hired the day before, men who did not know Harold and did not work under him. They stood by the door like furniture. Nina walked in still wearing her pale blue uniform. Her hands were folded in front of her. Miss Carter, Celeste said, 2 pieces of my jewelry have gone missing. After a thorough investigation, we have determined that you are responsible. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Nina did not flinch. Ma'am, I have not stolen anything from this house. The investigation says otherwise. What investigation? That is not your concern. I would like to see the evidence, ma'am. I would like to know what I am being accused of and what proof there is. Celeste's eyes narrowed. You don't get to ask questions of me, girl. The word hung in the air. Theodore shifted uncomfortably. Nina did not respond to the word. She had been raised by an aunt who taught her never to dignify cruelty with anger. She simply said, Ma'am, I would like a written termination notice, and I would like the chance to clear my name. You will receive your final paycheck in the mail. You have 1 hour to collect your belongings from the staff quarters and leave the property. These men will escort you. Nina's eyes burned, but she did not let one tear fall in front of Celeste Harrington. She nodded once. Yes, ma'am. She turned and walked out of the sitting room. The 2 security guards followed her. Margaret was waiting in the staff quarters with a small box. She had already packed Nina's locker. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. It's not your fault, Margaret. I know I'm still sorry. Nina took the box. She paused. Then she looked at Margaret. Can I do one thing before I go? Anything. Can I say goodbye to him? Margaret looked at the 2 security guards standing in the hallway behind Nina. Then she looked at Nina. She nodded slowly. 5 minutes, I'll handle the guards. She walked out and spoke quietly to them. Whatever she said worked. They stepped back. Margaret took the box from Nina and held it. 5 minutes. Nina walked alone to the medical wing. Grant heard her come in. He heard the door close. He heard her footsteps cross the room. He felt her sit down beside the bed and take his hand. Mr. Whitfield, she whispered, I have to go. They're sending me away. I won't be back tomorrow. Her voice did not crack, but her hand was trembling slightly. I want you to know something before I leave. I don't know if you can hear me. I never knew. But I'm going to talk anyway because some things need to be said even if no one is listening. There are people in this house who do not love you, Mr. Whitfield. There are people in this house who are waiting for you to die so they can take what is yours. I have heard things. I have seen things. And I think you should know. Your fiancé and your stepbrother are not just family. There is something between them that is not family. I saw it the first night you fell. I saw it again last week in the rose garden when they thought no one was watching. I do not say this to hurt you. I say this because if you wake up, you should wake up to the truth. They are firing the staff who care about you. They have brought in a doctor to declare you incapable. Margaret Foley has been let go because she would not fire me. Antonio, the gardener, is gone. Charlotte from the kitchen is gone. There is a man named Theodore who carries papers around in a leather briefcase, and I believe those papers are not for your good. I am not telling you this to ask for my job back. I'm telling you because somebody should. Because the people you trust the most are the people you cannot trust at all. And because somewhere inside this body in this bed, there might still be a man who would want to know. I have a son named Eli. He's 5. He told you to wake up because of cookies, but really he wanted you to wake up because his mama needed her job. Now I won't have it. We'll be all right. My aunt will help us. I'm not afraid. The Lord has carried me through harder things than this. I just wanted you to wake up because the world is better when good men open their eyes. So if you can hear me, Mr. Whitfield, please open your eyes. Please open them soon. Before it's too late for everything you've built. She squeezed his hand. She wiped her cheek with her free hand. Goodbye, Mr. Whitfield. May the Lord watch over you. She let go of his hand and stood up. She walked to the door. Behind her, Grant Whitfield's eyes opened. She did not see him. She walked out of the medical wing and out of the Whitfield estate, escorted by 2 strange security guards, with a small cardboard box containing her uniform, her thermos, and a worn paperback children's book. 5 minutes after she left, Dr. Bellamy walked into the medical wing. Grant was sitting up. His eyes were open. His face was pale but firm. Patricia, he said, his voice was rough from disuse. Get me water, get me Harold, get me Vivian Holloway. We are doing this tomorrow. Dr. Bellamy nodded once. Tomorrow. And Patricia. Yes. Find out where that young woman lives. I don't want her looking for a job. I want her safe. Already on it. She handed him a glass of water. He drank slowly. For the first time in 18 days, Grant Whitfield smiled. The next morning, Theodore Whitfield called a family meeting in the grand drawing room of the Whitfield estate. He had reason to feel confident. Dr. Bellamy had finally signed an interim incapacity declaration the night before, citing the patient's continued lack of response and recommending temporary transfer of decision-making authority. Bram Hallcroft, the family lawyer, was already at the estate with the transfer of power documents. Celeste was wearing a soft blush dress and had practiced her grieving expression in the mirror for 40 minutes. The room filled at 10 in the morning. Bram Hallcroft stood at the head of the long mahogany table with a leather folder. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you know, Mr. Grant Whitfield has been in a medically declared state of incapacity for almost 3 weeks now. With the unfortunate prognosis we have received, the family must take steps to ensure the continuity of his estate and the company. To that end, I have prepared the necessary documents to temporarily transfer authority to his next of kin, Mr. Theodore Whitfield, until such time as Mr. Grant Whitfield recovers. He set the folder on the table. Celeste pressed a tissue to her eye. Theodore stepped forward. Thank you, Bram. This is a sad day for our family, but we must do what is right for the company and for my brother's legacy. He picked up a pen. He held it over the signature line. The doors at the back of the drawing room opened. Grant Whitfield walked in. He was wearing a soft maroon sweater, dark blue trousers, and clean leather shoes. His face was clean-shaven. His hair was combed. He walked slowly but steadily, with Dr. Bellamy at his side and Harold Pierce a few steps behind. Behind them came a sharp-eyed black woman in an emerald green pantsuit carrying a thick leather portfolio. Attorney Vivian Holloway. The room went silent. Celeste's tissue slipped from her hand. Theodore's pen froze in midair. Grant walked the length of the long room until he stood at the opposite end of the mahogany table, directly across from Theodore. "Don't sign that, brother," Grant said quietly. "It would be a waste of ink." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Celeste rose slowly, her face arranged into a careful, glowing smile. "Grant, my darling, you're awake. Oh, thank God, thank God." She started toward him. Grant lifted one hand. She stopped. "Sit down, Celeste." The smile faltered. "Grant, I—" "Sit down." She sat. Vivian Holloway stepped forward and set her portfolio on the table. She opened it. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Vivian Holloway. I am Mr. Whitfield's personal attorney. Over the past 3 weeks, with Mr. Whitfield's full consent and at his direction, my firm, in coordination with the head of estate security, has compiled extensive evidence regarding a conspiracy to defraud Mr. Whitfield of his fortune and his company." Theodore's face turned the color of paper. "Mr. Theodore Whitfield, Miss Celeste Harrington, you are both about to be presented with a summary of the recordings, financial transactions, and witness statements that have been gathered. I would strongly suggest you remain seated." She turned to a tablet she had set on the table. She tapped it. Audio began to play. Celeste's voice filled the room. "No, I don't think we should rush it. Theodore says the doctor is being difficult. We need to wait until she's cleared us through the worst of it. If he doesn't wake up in 2 weeks, then we move. Patience, sweetheart. Patience pays better." Celeste's mouth fell open. The audio continued. Phone calls, conversations in the rose garden, discussions in the east drawing room, hours of carefully gathered evidence. Then Vivian moved to the second piece. Receipts, bank transfers, a photo of Theodore handing a cash envelope to Dr. Sterling Kramer, a copy of Kramer's medical license review notice from the state board. Then the third piece, the forged transfer documents Bram Holcroft had drawn up. Vivian held one up. "Mr. Holcroft, did you know, when you drafted this paperwork, that Mr. Theodore Whitfield was being recorded discussing his plan to use these documents for the purposes of seizing control of Whitfield Holdings, while his stepbrother was alive and recoverable?" Bram Holcroft turned the color of curdled milk. I was not aware of any conspiracy. I drafted the paperwork as instructed." "Good, then you'll cooperate fully with the investigation. The state bar has already been notified." Bram sat down without being told. Vivian looked across the table at Celeste and Theodore. "Ladies and gentlemen, the police are waiting in the front hall. Charges will include conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft of corporate assets, bribery of a medical professional, falsification of medical records, and several lesser counts. Miss Harrington, you may also face charges of false accusation against a former employee." Celeste's hands were trembling. Theodore's eyes had gone glassy. Grant spoke for the first time since he had told his stepbrother to put down the pen. "Theodore," he said quietly, "I gave you everything our father did not give you. A job, a salary 3 times what you were worth, a seat at every table. I would have given you more. All you had to do was ask." Theodore did not answer. Grant turned to Celeste. "And you, I would have made you my wife. You would have lived a life most women only dream about. You did not need to take anything. It was already going to be yours." Celeste finally found her voice. "Grant, please, we can talk about this. Please, my love." "You are not my love, you never were, and I am no longer your fool." He nodded to Harold Pierce. Harold opened the door. 2 uniformed officers walked in. They did not speak. They did not need to. They simply read the rights, placed handcuffs on Theodore and Celeste, and walked them out of the drawing room. The doors closed. Vivian Holloway closed her portfolio. Dr. Bellamy let out a breath she had been holding for nearly 3 weeks. Margaret Foley, who had been standing quietly by the door, pressed both hands to her face and began to cry softly. Grant turned to her. "Margaret." "Yes, sir." "You're rehired, effective 2 weeks ago with back pay and a raise." "Sir, and I owe you an apology. You stood up for someone when nobody else would. You were the kind of woman my mother used to tell me about." Margaret's lower lip trembled. "Yes, sir." Grant looked at Harold. "Where is Nina?" "Across town. Her aunt's apartment. I have the address." "Take me there." "Yes, sir." Dr. Bellamy stepped forward. "Grant, you've been in bed for almost 3 weeks. You need to eat first." "I'll eat in the car." "Grant." "Patricia." She looked at him, then she nodded. "In the car, and you're drinking electrolytes." "Yes, ma'am." He almost smiled. For the first time in his entire adult life, he was about to do something for himself that had nothing to do with money. Aunt Rosalind Carter's apartment building was a 4-story brick walk-up in a tidy older neighborhood 30 minutes from the Whitfield estate. The front steps had a small pot of red geraniums on them. The mailboxes inside the entryway were old brass and slightly dented. The hallway smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Grant Whitfield, in his maroon sweater and dark blue trousers, climbed 3 flights of stairs slowly. Harold walked behind him. Dr. Bellamy waited in the car, drinking her own coffee and trying not to think about Grant's blood pressure. At apartment 3B, Grant paused. He could hear voices through the door. A woman's voice, soft and warm, telling a story. A child's voice, high and curious, asking questions. Another woman's voice, older, laughing softly. For a moment, Grant just stood there listening. His chest felt tight in a way it had not felt in years. He had spent his whole life surrounded by silence in big rooms. He had never realized that a small apartment full of voices was a kind of wealth he could not buy. He raised his hand. He knocked. The voices on the other side stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. Aunt Rosalind's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were sharp behind her reading glasses. "Yes." "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Grant Whitfield. I'm here to see Nina Carter if she's home." Aunt Rosalind's eyes widened slightly. She looked him up and down. She looked at the gray-haired white man standing behind him. "You're the one in the coma." "I was, yes, ma'am." "You're awake now." "Yes, ma'am." Aunt Rosalind closed the door. Grant heard the chain slide. The door opened fully. Nina was standing in the middle of the small living room. She was wearing a soft green sweater and dark blue jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun. Her eyes were wide and tired and surprised. Eli was sitting on the couch with a coloring book in his lap. He looked up at Grant with the same small, curious face he had worn in the medical wing. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Eli's mouth opened. "You woke up." Grant looked at the boy. "Yes," he said softly, "I woke up." "Did you eat the cookies?" Grant felt something break loose in his chest. He laughed, a quiet, rough sound. "Not yet, but I'm going to, I promise you that." Eli nodded, as if this was the only acceptable answer. Nina stepped forward, her hand pressed to her chest. "Mr. Whitfield, I don't understand. How did you know where to find me?" "Harold has resources. May I come in?" She blinked. "Yes, please. I'm sorry. Please come in." She stepped back. Aunt Rosalind, who had been watching everything carefully, gestured to the couch. "Sit down, both of you. Nina, put on the kettle. Mr. Whitfield, do you take sugar?" "Just one, ma'am, thank you." "Harold." "Black, please, ma'am, thank you kindly." Aunt Rosalind nodded. She liked a man with manners. Grant sat carefully on the small couch. Nina sat in the chair across from him. Harold stood quietly by the door. Eli, after a moment of consideration, climbed off the couch and stood in front of Grant with his coloring book. "Do you want to color?" Eli asked. Grant looked at him. "Yes," he said softly, "I would like that very much." Eli handed him a blue crayon and a half-finished page of a dinosaur. Grant began to color the dinosaur blue. Nina watched him with a face she could not quite arrange. "Mr. Whitfield." "Grant, please." "Grant, I don't understand any of this." He kept coloring. He spoke without looking up because he did not want to see her face when he told her. "Nina, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know it is the truth, even if it's hard to believe. I was not in a real coma." Nina's hand stopped moving. "What?" "I overheard Celeste planning to take everything I owned, with my stepbrother. So I worked with Dr. Bellamy and Harold to fake an incapacity. I needed to know who was loyal and who was not. I needed proof of what they were doing. I am very sorry. I never meant for you to be caught up in any of it." The silence in the small apartment was complete. Eli, sensing something, climbed quietly into his mother's lap. "You heard me," Nina said slowly. "You heard everything I said to you. Every word. The book. Every word. The Bible. Every word. What I said about my husband, about my boy, about the basil plant named Stanley." A small, tired smile crept onto Grant's face, especially the one about Stanley. Nina pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes were filling. "And what I said yesterday, about the firing, about warning you. That's why I woke up, Nina. That's why I'm here." She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. Grant set down the crayon. He spoke very carefully. "Nina, you do not owe me anything. You do not owe me a smile. You do not owe me forgiveness. You did not sign up for any of this. I came here today for 3 reasons. First, to apologize. I am deeply sorry that you had to endure being falsely accused, fired, and escorted off my property. That should never have happened. The 2 security guards who walked you out have already been fired. The accusation has been formally withdrawn. Margaret Foley is back at her post with a raise. Your name is fully cleared with everyone in that household." Nina opened her eyes. "Second, I want to offer you the position of estate liaison. It is a new role. You would not be a maid. You would oversee the well-being of all the household staff. You would have your own office. The salary would be 6 times what you were earning before. Full health insurance for you and Eli. A college fund for Eli. A car. A driver if you want one." Nina's mouth opened. Aunt Rosalind, who had returned with a tray of tea, set the tray down very slowly. "Third," Grant said quietly, looking up at Nina, "I want to offer you something else. I do not expect you to take it today. I do not expect you to take it next month. I do not expect you to take it ever if you do not feel it in your heart. But I have to say it because I would never forgive myself if I did not. I have spent 18 days listening to you read me children's books and pray for me, and tell me about your boy and your basil plant. I have spent 18 days hearing your voice in a quiet room, and in those 18 days, I came to know more about who you are than I ever knew about the woman I almost married. I have spent my whole life surrounded by people who love what I have. You are the first person I have ever met who, while believing I had nothing to give you, gave me everything anyway. You read to a stranger in a bed. You held the hand of a man you did not know. You brought your son into my room because you believed a child's voice could be a small candle. I would like to spend the rest of my life learning how to be the kind of man who deserves a woman like you. I am asking, very humbly, if you would let me try. Not as your employer, not as your boss, as a man who would be honored to know you and your son." The room was silent. Eli looked up at his mother. "Mama," he whispered, "is the cookie man going to be our friend?" Nina laughed through tears. "Yes, baby," she said softly, "I think he might be." She looked at Grant. She did not say no. She did not refuse. She had been raised to accept kindness when it was given, with gratitude and grace. "I would like that very much, Grant," she said. Aunt Rosalind let out a breath she had been holding. Grant smiled. Eli held out a green crayon. "You can color the trees now." Grant took the crayon. He began to color the trees. 6 months passed. Theodore Whitfield was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud and bribery. Celeste Harrington was sentenced to 3 years. Bram Hallcroft lost his license to practice law. Dr. Sterling Kramer lost his license to practice medicine. The 2 security guards who had escorted Nina off the property were placed on a national do-not-hire list in the private security industry. The remaining staff at the Whitfield estate were given raises, full health insurance, and a profit-sharing arrangement that Grant and his new chief operating officer designed together. Margaret Foley accepted Grant's offer to stay on as head housekeeper for 2 more years before retiring. Harold Pierce was promoted to chief of corporate security across all of Whitfield Holdings. Antonio, the gardener, was hired back. Charlotte from the kitchen was hired back. Every staff member who had been unfairly fired received a personal apology from Grant and a generous severance for the time they had lost. Dr. Patricia Bellamy continued as Grant's personal physician. Vivian Holloway continued as his attorney and became a board member of the new Whitfield Family Foundation. The foundation, established 4 months after Grant's recovery, focused on 3 things: scholarships for the children of domestic workers, emergency funds for single mothers, and medical care for the elderly without family support. Nina helped design every program. She had ideas Grant had never thought of, because she had lived through every hardship the foundation was built to ease. Aunt Rosalind moved out of her 3-flight walk-up into a comfortable 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of the Whitfield property, gifted to her with no strings attached, and a small monthly stipend that meant she would never have to worry again. She still came over every afternoon to help with Eli, because she could not imagine a day without that boy in it. Eli started kindergarten in the fall. He carried his lunch in a maroon backpack and wore his red sneakers every single day until they fell apart, and Grant bought him 3 new pairs. He started calling Grant Dad 4 months in. He had asked permission first, which had made Nina cry in the kitchen for a long time. Grant had said yes the moment the question left the boy's mouth. In the spring, on a clear, bright morning with cool sunlight falling through the tall windows of the Whitfield estate, Grant and Nina were married in the Rose Garden. The ceremony was small. Only 40 people attended. Aunt Rosalind walked Nina down the path in a long emerald green dress. Eli, wearing a small blue suit with a maroon bow tie, carried the rings on a small velvet pillow with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. Margaret Foley wept openly through the entire ceremony. Harold Pierce stood as Grant's best man. Dr. Patricia Bellamy stood as Nina's matron of honor. Nina wore a long, simple cream dress with soft blue flowers embroidered along the hem. She did not wear black. She did not wear gold. She wore the colors that she loved. Grant wore a maroon suit and a soft blue shirt. He had thrown out every single black suit he owned the week before. When the officiant asked Grant to speak his vows, he spoke quietly, simply, without preparation. "Nina, the first time you held my hand, you thought you were holding the hand of a stranger. You were wrong. You were holding the hand of the man I was supposed to be all along, and you were the woman who showed me how to find him. You read me children's books. You prayed for me when no one else would. You raised a son alone with more grace than most people raise their own selves. I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be the kind of husband and the kind of father a woman like you and a boy like Eli deserve. I love you. I will love you all the days of my life." Nina's vows were even simpler. "Grant, I came into your house carrying a thermos and a photograph of my son. I never expected to leave with anything but a paycheck. I leave today with a family, a home, and a life I never let myself dream about. You are a kind man. You are a good man. You did not have to be either. You chose to be. I love you, and I promise to walk beside you every day in the bright light and in the dark. And I promise to teach our children, however many we have, to be the kind of people who light small candles in big rooms. She slipped the ring on his finger. He slipped the ring on hers. Eli, watching from the front row, whispered loudly, "Are they done yet? I want cake." Everyone laughed. The officiant smiled and pronounced them husband and wife. That evening, after the small reception, after Aunt Rosalind had been driven home, and Eli had been put to bed in his new bedroom on the second floor of the estate, Grant and Nina walked out into the rose garden alone. The sun had not quite set. The light was soft and cool, pale blue, pale silver. The roses were just beginning to bloom in their first early colors of the season. Reds, pinks, soft creams. Not a single thing in the garden was dark. Grant took Nina's hand. "How are you?" he asked softly. "I am happy." "Good. Are you?" "More than I knew I could be." They walked slowly along the gravel path. The air smelled like cool earth and new flowers. "Grant," Nina said after a while, "do you remember the night I told you about the basil plant?" "Stanley. Stanley." She smiled. "I want to plant a real garden here, a proper one, vegetables, herbs, a patch for Eli. Maybe we can get the foundation kids out here in the summers, teach them, let them grow things. Whatever you want. I want it because of what I read to you, about that community garden in that little town. The empty parking lot they turned into something that fed folks. I have been thinking about it ever since." Grant stopped walking. He turned to her. "Nina, anything you want to build, I will build with you. Any place you want to plant, we will plant it. Any door you want to open, we will open it together." She looked up at him. "Then let's build a garden," she said softly. He squeezed her hand. "Let's build a garden." They walked on. The sun moved low in the sky behind them. The cool light fell in long, soft bars across the gravel. The first roses of the season nodded gently in the breeze. Somewhere upstairs, in a warm second-floor bedroom, a 5-year-old boy named Eli was already asleep with a small basil plant on his windowsill, the only thing he had brought with him from the old apartment. He had named the basil plant Stanley. In the morning, he would water it. And the garden, the foundation, the family, the long, quiet life ahead would all begin from there.